All right, so welcome everybody to another Nova Scribes. I'm Brian Terrallo. It's nice to see you all again for another one of these. Is anybody here for the first time attending a Nova Scribes? Show of hands. So Martine, Angelique, Karen's clapping or raising your hand. Carmi's new. Okay, so for those of you that are not familiar with it, Nova Scribes is a free and open forum for visual practitioners. We are anybody who uses visuals in order to move others. So this is graphic facilitators, visual facilitators, graphic recorders, UX, UI designers, sketch noters, data analytic visualizer people, however you call it. And if you have an idea for an event or a conversation or a workshop, just shoot any of the organizers a note. On this call, it's me, Brian Terrell, Rachel Thompson, wave Rachel, is another Nova Scribes organizer, and we're happy to help create a space for, also Casey. Casey being awesome is one of our newest organizers. Casey's helping us on the back end with some of the video production work. And so you can shoot any of us a note, say, hey, I've got this idea for this thing, and we'll create a space for you. This is a free conversation. We just sort of wanted to open it up. I certainly don't feel like an expert in AI. I've used it a little bit with my work, and I'm excited to show you how. But when Angelique and I were talking about this, we didn't really feel right charging for this. Occasionally, we do charge for events, and when we do, it goes a little bit into pay for the Meetup platform, also back into the community. So we do scholarships for people to attend events like the IFEP, the International Forum of Visual Practitioners, and we also donate money to the Buddy Whitethorn Foundation, which advances arts and arts education in the Native American community out in the southwestern United States. So just so you know where your money's going if you ever sign up for one of our paid workshops or discussions, okay? So for today, let's chat about AI. And Angelique, maybe we can just kind of do a quick back and forth and how did we get to this discussion?
Hi, everybody. So my realm is pretty much graphic recording, just so you understand that I'm coming from that perspective. And last year, I think it was August, maybe July, Brian, and got this really bizarre email message from me. I'd been playing around with Stable Diffusion, which is visual software for creating images. And I started sending him pictures of statues mixed with butterflies and serpent heads. And that was kind of my first foray into just really understanding that these tools were coming around for all of us. So I guess we just picked it up again, a month ago, Brian, when I started, I reached out again after ChatGPT started hitting the scene, and just, my mind was kind of blown about all of this and where things were going to go next, and Adobe Firefly was dropping. So I'm like, I need to ping somebody about this, and Brian was my person for that, knowing that he was the first person who got me to put on those goggles and go into a virtual world. So
yeah, and the only thing that VR and AI have in common is they're both like 2-letter acronyms, and that's about it. But as we started going back and forth on like, well, what are you doing with it, and what are you doing with it, I thought, there's probably a third person that we need to get involved in this conversation, and that's Tanya Gadsby. And so we sort of put a note out to her. Hi, Tanya. And Tanya said, yep, sure enough, she's doing some stuff with AI. So Tanya, you want to talk about a little bit about what brings you to the table?
Yeah, definitely. And I'm honored to be here. I'm zooming in from Lekwungen territory, which is Victoria, BC, on the coast of Canada. And I've been dabbling mostly with AR up to this point. So augmented reality and blending that with graphic facilitation. But since January, we've been using AI pretty extensively with our work, but for specific use cases. So that's always what I'm interested in, is sharing ideas with folks that are in different realms and hearing how there could be new use cases or different ways of using it. So I'm excited to be here.
So Tanya, in no particular order, you said that you've got a use case. Do you want to talk about like what you've done using AI, and maybe we can kind of go around, and then Angelique, and then, I can show you a couple of stuff. All right.
And I think what a lot of folks might find intimidating is that it's moving so fast that there's a lot of different things happening, and it's like you don't have to try and keep up. It's evolving fast. So the uses that I've been focusing on are specific applications and less trying to like keep up with everything. The big one that we've been using the most is ChatGPT. We have the paid account, which is, I think, like $20 a month, and you have better access or quicker access. So we use ChatGPT 4, which is more intelligent. And been using that for everything from agenda design and drilling down and prompting it even deeper than just saying, hey, design an agenda for a full day meeting, but actually telling it, hey, these are the people in the space, and these are the dynamics at play, and refining the agenda from there. And so always thinking of it as an iterative process with ChatGPT, but it's quite amazing. You can tell it design within liberating structures, or this methodology, or this type of creativity we need to have in the session, or it needs to be dialed back. It needs to be very straightforward and less playful. So that's been a really useful tool for sure. And then also using it in the live meeting environment space. So having it help me, I'm mostly working as a graphic facilitator, synthesize content fairly quickly and planning for that. So using, for example, there might be breakout groups and they have a lot of sticky notes they've put up on the wall. It takes me a long time to look at that and say, oh, okay, what's the common themes? It's all over the place. Instead, I take a photo of it. You can grab the text from that photo on most phones. They can recognize text, copy it, paste it into ChatGPT and say, hey, extract these themes from these sticky notes based on this. So I might have a specific guidance to that. Like, I'm looking for actionable items, or I'm looking for strategic outcomes, or whatever. And it will do that. And it's actually amazing how good it is if you've prompted it well. And this little video that I'm going to put in the chat here demonstrates that. It's a 2-minute video. It's not public, so just, keep it to yourself. I haven't published it or anything. But it shows me doing that process by taking a photo of sticky notes. I brought into Google Lens in this application, but any phone typically can copy text from an image at this point. So you don't have to have Google Lens, but it's pretty cool. Yeah, that's something that blows my mind that it can do that. So yeah.
Amazing timing. So when you use AI in order to write facilitation guide, let me just say that's incredible. I didn't know you could even do that. Like I really pride myself on the design of a facilitated workshop, going through each one of the beats and all of that.
Yeah.
How much refining and kind of tweaking do you have to do after ChatGPT spits out a facilitation guide to you?
Yeah, you do. This one I think I was using, so I'm sharing my screen here. This is ChatGPT. There's different threads I have going because I use it for a lot of different uses within my business. But this is the prompt thread that I did. This is ChatGPT 3, so it's an older version, and I know that because the icon is green. So keep that in mind. I had to prompt it a little bit more, but I always start with a pretty clear prompt around, I want you to act as a meeting agenda designer. I want you to have a creative and playful tone for this meeting, but it should still have beneficial outcomes. I started with something pretty basic, and then I provided it with some objectives for the meeting, behind the vision in the future, who's in the space, that sort of thing. And then it kind of spat out a basic agenda. It didn't give me too much about what these group activities were. So I asked it, I said, I think it was this part that I asked it to drill down and outline what these group activities are for each section. And then we did a little bit of back and forth. I think I said the vision alignment exercise was too similar to a different exercise that already existed. And so it modified it. And so it's just a simple example of how you can work with it almost as a colleague. You still need the human factor. You still need someone to run this in the session. So I think of it more as a tool that I can kind of just bounce ideas off of and refine exercises and things. So yeah.
Amazing. I'm noticing a nice generous 1-hour lunch. I think that this ChatGPT is a lot more generous than I would be with these participants.
Exactly.
So how has this changed your workflow?
I think instead of thinking, it's changed how I think about if I have a problem. Like, I'm also an animator. And so if I run into an issue with my animation software that I can't solve, instead of spending a long time Googling and searching for the answer in forums, my instinct now is to go to ChatGPT, and I cannot even find, I have a lot of threads, but to ask it, hey, this is my exact issue I'm having with After Effects. What the heck's going on? How can I solve it? And it will tell me that specific solution. So it's almost like an enhanced search feature. Yeah, I love it for that purpose.
Yeah, so it sounds like you're using it almost like a text-only colleague that you can ask for ideas or bounce questions off of. Is that right?
Yeah, Yep, exactly. And it's been extremely helpful as well with business side of things. So almost as a business coach or advisor, contracts as well, just contract advisor, not saying I'm entering confidential information in here. I'm very sensitive around that as well. I don't know where the information is going, so I always try to redact any sensitive content. But yeah, it's been fantastic.
That's really cool. Anything else? What else are you using around using
Well,
AI for?
one thing that I'm interested in, and this just launched, I think this week or the week before. So there's kind of developing with ChatGPT is something called Agent GPT. And what that is no longer, you don't have to prompt this to tell you something or give you an answer. It prompts itself. So you give it an end goal. It's like ChatGPT on steroids. If you give it an end goal, like, for example, I want my website to run faster and more efficiently and do better in Google results. You just tell it that goal and it prompts itself through stages of analyzing your website and what needs to be improved. And it spits that back out. It's quite remarkable. You just have to give it an end goal and it produces itself, its own prompts to get to that goal. So that I'm pretty excited about to see evolve. And of course, we've been playing around with Firefly, Adobe Firefly and Midjourney as well with the image prompting as well. It's yeah, a lot of different ways of using it.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
So before I turn it over to Angelique, I just want to open it up. Does anybody have a question? Who has a question for Tanya? And you can go off mute, you can raise your hand, whatever works best for you. Martine, Angela, I know two of you are off mute, but I'm not sure if that was intentional.
Yeah, on purpose.
Yeah, go ahead, Angela.
May I just quickly, I've just been playing around with it, and about 6 years ago, I did my thesis and spent several months analyzing the data, the narrative data, coding it. And the other day I did it in, about a second. I put in the narrative and said, theme it for me. And it's, oh my gosh. Yeah. Every student's dream. And remove duplicates and tell me, right down to competencies, in this role, then what would the competencies be? And it organized them into competency. It was incredible. Yeah. So big time saver.
Really alleviates a lot of that grind, of scrubbing data and looking for trends.
Exactly. Exactly.
Okay. Angelique, how have you been using it? How have you been playing? Oh, wait, Karen's got her hand up. Go ahead,
Yeah,
Karen.
my question was, I love this idea of being able to use it for themes on sticky notes during meetings, but I'm wondering how you're doing in that live in terms of how long does it take, and are people on break, or are you having them and doing other things? How do you implement that?
Yeah, you got to make sure that you've got the time to do it. It's not something that you can just do on the fly, I would say. So the agenda has to allow for it. And then on your side of things, you'd have to practice it ahead of time too, like doing that, going through the steps at home, and doing a test of that, because you don't want to be fumbling in the moment. No. And even if you've built in enough time. So that's the big caveat. Good catch there, Karen.
Thank you.
Okay. Angelique, how have you been using it?
I'm probably about 100 steps behind Tanya, but I've been dabbling with
I feel the same way. Yeah.
Catching up here with my contract, running that through, making sure my language was clear, seeing what improvements could be made. That was a really fairly easy thing to do. Going through, same thing with my website, trying to clean up the language, looking for keywords I may not have thought of, but not as, I love the agent GPT idea of giving it the end result and not having to figure out the prompts. So, last year when I had, first discovered the whole Midjourney journey, I said to a friend, I want to be a prompt engineer. That, that would be so cool. Not realizing really how complicated that could be. So I'm going to drop a link in the chat, and hopefully it'll work for you guys. It should be shared with anybody who has a link. Let me know if it doesn't work. And it's a really simple Google Doc. One of the things I've really wrestled with is everything's changing so fast. And, I'm somebody who kind of wants to see the lay of the land before I start really learning things. And that doesn't work in this environment because it's changing so fast. So what I've been doing is a lot of just keeping up with a couple people on Twitter who really curate what they put out there. It's not overwhelming. The AI Valley is a person who has a really straightforward Twitter feed, and they send out an email newsletter, I don't know, every couple times a week, and it's just the breaking news. It's really, and he probably has the AI writing it. The language is really crisp and clear, and that kind of helps me feel like, you know, I know where everything's going. The next thing on the list is a mid-journey startup guide, so that you know, you can kind of get introduced to the whole idea of writing prompts and how you can write them and be effective doing that. And you know, you don't have to dive in really far in these things to start playing. The I Create Life on Twitter person is somebody who's very skilled. She teaches. She was just doing a course at Columbia and NYU, introducing people to these tools. And she's just, you know, she's like having somebody hold your hand on Twitter, which is great. And she puts out these prompt challenges. So she'll highlight a new tool that maybe Midjourney has, or Dolly, all of them. And people will play around with that prompt and that idea and come with really creative solutions, and you can see what everybody's doing. So there's a nice sense of community around it as well, which I think is really helpful when you're trying to learn something new and it's pretty intimidating. There's a big picture overview for ChatGPT, which is really helpful for just, hey, what do I do with this stuff? A lot of what Tanya spoke about is very similar types of things, not too complicated, and, you know, visionary and accessible at the same time. You know, this whole app thing that suddenly happened, you know, ChatGPT came out, and then all of a sudden there was all these apps that were acting as intermediaries to information. And I started trying to make a list of them, and then I realized that somebody was obviously already doing that. So it was easier to find them. So they have a great spreadsheet in Notion that they seem to be keeping up with it. And there's, you know, there's a couple hundred of them, but you can categorize them by, they have them categorized for you, so you can sort them easily. One of the things that really caught my eye with that, Brian, was the audio that you can do now. So you don't need to hire somebody to do a voiceover. You can, you know, have the AI take care of doing the voiceover for you, which is a really nice step. I do a lot of time-lapse video, and, you know, sometimes clients want really fast turnaround, and that's just, you know, adding the audio in is going to complicate that. So this is a great way for me to keep control of the audio and syncing things. Yeah, so much stuff. So much stuff. So I have a couple friends who are fine artists, and their work is online. And we were talking about, well, you know, is my work being used as part of the pool of training data? And it turns out that there's this great tool, and it was created by, I can't remember which group of artists, but if you want to know if any of your images that you've created are in the training tool, just go to that link, upload your picture. It's very fast, and it does a search, and it shows you anything that looks like it. And you can actually request that it not be used in the training data, which for me was the only issue is that in the future, I want to be able to upload my work to the AI. And then if I do a sketch, I want it to spit my work back in my style. So I don't want other people using my style or having, you know, things get watered down when they're all in a big pool. So, so that was my intention with that. And also I think that, you know, people deserve a lot of agency around how their work is used. I don't know, do any of you guys hang out on Discord? Is that a thing that people of our generation, oh, Brian, of course, see.
Oh, Casey too, looks like.
Okay. Discord is really where the conversations are happening. So, you know, I've got it loaded. I've done the first step, and I know there's a couple of groups to join, but if you make your way to Twitter, usually people are linking to their Discord channels, but Twitter is kind of the gateway, and then Discord is the next step for really getting into the weeds with people. So yeah, that's kind of how I'm looking at it, and trying not to get overwhelmed as I as I go in. One of the thoughts I had about, and was wondering what you guys thought as facilitators about, bringing the voice of AI into the room. Like, how do you feel about creating participants who might represent a different point of view and integrating that? Yeah, that's one of the things I throw out there. Really.
Yeah, that actually happened to me just a couple of weeks ago. That somebody had a Chat GPT window open on their laptop, and when we were doing certain things, doing certain modalities around strategic planning, that person was just keying in those same modalities into Chat GPT and getting more ideas, and it was actually pretty amazing. What made it even better is after there was a certain critical mass of ideas that was generated by the group, this person would then, get those into the Chat GPT to say, okay, we're looking for additional suggestions like these. And then it got real specific to say, oh yeah, we should have thought of that, this and the other. So it was kind of crazy. It felt like there was a, AI as a participant in the room. Angelique, you brought up the concept around how some artists don't want the AI to be trained on their kind of work. I noticed when I went through the Adobe Firefly material that there was a very clear opt-out, of certain kinds of work that you could do with Firefly. And that was something that impressed me with the Firefly demo. Has anybody else used Firefly? Because I signed up for the beta and I still haven't gotten the thumbs up on that one yet. Has anybody been able to use Firefly yet? Tanya's nodding. Tanya, can you talk a little bit about your experience using Firefly?
It's not too much different from Midjourney. It's fairly. I used Midjourney most before this. It's just kind of like a prettied up, less stuff going on. So it's more user friendly, I would say. But I've been mostly using it. For example, we do a lot of animation work, and there's certain angles or scenes that we want to create. And so we can ask it, say, I want an isometric view, which means like a 3D kind of look down on a scene of a community garden. And I can ask it for that, and it'll produce different angles or different samples for that we can then use as a reference image for producing our work. So I've been mostly using it in that way. I have not really found it super useful for producing work that we can use in our animations or products that we're creating, because we're so customized already, and the content we're handling is very, I would say, sensitive. So it requires that human element to translate it into graphics that work. But yeah, it's got a lot of potential for sure.
Yeah, since I also have used image creation for reference images, for non non-licensed reference images. Now, it's not great. Let me show you actually what I think I've got an example up here. Can you see my screen okay? It should still be Angelique's document. Okay, cool. So I was using Image Creator in Bing, which had been DALL-E. I believe that Bing actually acquired DALL-E. And I'll show you, let's see if I've got my creations in here. Here we go. So, all right, that's just me playing around. I wanted to see like Godzilla versus Mechagodzilla. It's okay, it referenced the toys that are there. And then I was trying to get, okay, well, let's see if we can create a graphic facilitator. So a graphic facilitator drawing in front of a crowd. Sort of, that didn't work out so good. So it's like, well, okay, what about a muralist drawing in front of a cloud? That's okay, you can kind of see the crowd here. And then I was like, okay, well, let's do a really common reference image that I might want to draw later, or just use as a basis for like a single line drawing, which is something that I really love to do. So I said, all right, give me a diverse team of people, okay? And it's like, okay, at first glance, that's not too bad. You've got all different colors and shades of people, but then if you look at it, like this guy's got some issues going on. I mean, it's not great. If you really take a look at the faces here, it's getting there, but it's not quite there yet. So, again, I'm wondering if anybody else has tried using Image Creator in their work or something like it. Tanya, you mentioned Midjourney for reference images. Anybody else try this out? Feel free to, go off mute. Get your voice out there, Martine. Yeah, go ahead.
I did something different because I'm not used to work with all these stable diffusion and all stuff, but I had this Chat GPT, and at a certain moment I needed an icon, and I know it's text-based, But I asked, what would you draw? And I came with really good explanations and ideas of what I could draw without copying an image from somewhere else. But it was like, okay. And they gave some perspective that I didn't know or didn't think about it. So even the text-based intelligence can help you with drawings.
Yeah, again, for that reference image type thing. And by the way, Martine, thank you very much for sharing the preview of the book on in chat. Yeah, do you want to speak to that a little bit? What's the book?
I got it some days ago. It's a Dutch guy. I don't know who made a book, but it's the whole innovation process from starting with the idea, the prompts they use till the end, and they have also a case in it with all the prompts. So it could be interesting for. But I need to go deeper.
Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, if you haven't downloaded it, it's in Zoom chat right now. And then Angela was sending me some kind of quiet notes. Angela, do you want to go off mute and speak to that a little bit?
Sure. So I went on a webinar the other day. I have no idea how it happened, but I was there, and they're doing it again on Thursday night at 11:30 p.m. So they're doing this all over the world, people all over the world. So can you see this, Brian? My studies have.
Yep.
Okay, so this was a program. This is a program. Do you know storms.me? And there's a beta for the bot on this. So what they did is they had us, first of all, go through a process of brainstorming that we're all familiar with and organizing it and naming it and everything else. So then they gave us another question and they had us, again, brainstorm. So all of these are the human brainstorm. And then they pressed a button and then the bot gave its ideas. And then we brainstormed even more and based on what the bot said. And then what they did, they had, all of these cards with the ideas, and he pressed a button and it categorized them all, took them, it sorted them all, and it named all of the categories, which is crazy. And then I had to leave, but the bot named this, the bot was here, and then I left, but I have the link. So then they got somehow to these final ideas, and you can see there's no bot here. So the bot would have done this. And then if we click on it, and I'm assuming the bot also did the images, but then again, just a second. If you look at this, can you see this when I pop it up? Yeah. And then, so then they had what's great about this idea. And again, you can see the humans and the bot, the problems. It was just wacky. So then I don't know if they then went down to, and it was the magic ad. I think that was the AI part of it. And then you can see out of the three ideas, the main ideas, there were the humans, and then the bot came up with that one. That again, they had all the information under that. Isn't that crazy?
That's really cool. I actually, what's coming up for me is if Mike Brown is still around, I'm wondering how AI might work into the brain zooming process.
Yeah, and I've been, thanks for asking. I've been testing that. Basically took a session that we did with a B2B client about 4 years ago. So we were past NDAs. So I knew what the results were of using our exercises, what their engineers came up with. So I ran our exercises through ChatGPT and also ran more general questions about the same topics. And I shared it back with the client. It was coming up, I basically was pushing it for 75 ideas, which is what we might push out of a poster. It was coming up with very comparable ideas to what their engineers were, plus came up with some better ideas as well. So, I mean, from a business standpoint, I wanted to know, could I replace a client, which unfortunately ChatGPT doesn't pay. So that's not that great of a business model to replace the client that way. But for us, I mean, a lot of times we're, as others of you have mentioned, we're customizing exercises going in, and it's sort of has been a hope and a prayer, and you think you know what's going to work. What that is allowing us to do now is basically practice the design with GPT as a stand-in client, so we know what exercises work, or their tweaks. I mean, I've done it with naming, I've done it with ideation. A lot of you have mentioned theming. I've been writing a spiritual reflection book. I ran the reflections through, and it was giving me very comparable categories to what I had done on my own. So yeah, I've got a lot of different ways that we're pushing it to save time, and similar to what somebody else said, I tend to look at it as a young analyst, a young MBA analyst that I would have had in the corporate world, that it's smart, it knows a lot, it thinks it knows more than it does. And I don't really ask it questions about things I can't go check easily, because it will come back with stuff that's nonsense and try and sell it to you. I've had it get into arguments with me about things, which is just fascinating. It's like, yeah, you are a young MBA. So anyway, that's how I've been messing around with it.
That's really cool, Mike. I love the idea of using it to test facilitation prompts, to see if the question that you're asking is actually going to create in the minds of your participants the content, the answers and the responses that you're looking for. I think that's a brilliant idea. Angelique, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, when I was developing, when it became brainstorming in the corporate world, it was a lot easier because the volume of things was so fast. I could test and change on a day in, day out basis. When we weren't a free resource, it hasn't gone that fast. So this is really the first time since I jumped out of the corporate world that I've got that capability to test stuff ahead of time. It's remarkable to be able to do.
Yeah. And by the way, for those of you that don't know Mike Brown, he's the CEO and the owner of Brain Zooming, and among a whole lot of other things that they do around creativity and innovation, he's also got I'll call it a proprietary virtual facilitation really pathway where people generate ideas and then rack and stack those ideas and then actually decide against those ideas. And so Mike was, if you want to do some virtual facilitation, especially around participatory decision making, Mike is a great resource to talk to. I noticed that Angelique had dropped a question for Angela in chat, so Angela, just point that out to you so you see it. I wanted to share with you one other thing before we open it up to a larger conversation. And I'd like to share with you kind of my first foray into playing around with AI live in front of a studio audience for a client. And so I had a challenge, which was, how do you get 650 people to coalesce together around a single vision? And just by way of a little bit of context here, so that's me. And I was at the Volunteers of America National Conference. So if you're not familiar with Volunteers of America, it's a national service organization. They have hundreds of affiliates. They've got thousands and thousands and thousands of volunteers that their goal is to help those most in need of help. So homelessness, shelter, behavioral health, they do a lot of really the hardest work in the world. And they invited me to help facilitate their national conference. So this was in July out in Las Vegas. So you got 650 people that are in the room, about, I don't know how many others that were also dialed in. So this is a hybrid meeting. And their goal was to come up with a single vision for what healthy communities look like, okay? And so first we kicked off with something that had nothing to do with AI, but I still thought it was pretty cool. I needed these folks to come up with a visual vocabulary for what does a community have. And so we used an app called Pickles, Piccles, okay? If you haven't used Pickles, it's pretty cool. But kind of like Mentimeter, you just throw a QR code up, and then what happens is that people are able to use their phones and draw whatever they want to, okay? And so whatever they draw, that works its way into the big picture up here. And so what I wanted them to do is come up with a visual vocabulary that they could reference later, okay? So that was a little bit of an energizer and an icebreaker, but they needed that. And then what happened is that we created this template. And again, with 650 people in the room, about 80 tables, we had about 80 of these templates spread out on each one of the tables. And so they did table work. And so, you know, as tables and groups, they filled it out. They said, okay, what does this future healthy community look like along the lines of, for example, the spiritual angle, the community and social angle, the healthcare angle, and then so forth. So they worked in small groups in order to fill that out. That not really helpful from a, you know, how do we consolidate this? So we had to take a second step. And after they completed it, I had them pull out, here's what they look like. After they completed it, I had them pull out their phones again and do a bit of a gallery walk. And so this time what they did is that they used Mentimeter. And if you're not familiar with Mentimeter, it's a survey tool. It's kind of like Poll Everywhere, if you know that one. And what I had them do was to get that content into a digital form by plugging in what they thought were the most interesting ideas. Okay. So now I've got all of these ideas in Mentimeter, and it's in a big spreadsheet. Okay. Let me go back a step. So if you take a look on the right there, that was the Mentimeter results. And I had, because again, 650 people, each one of them putting in multiple answers into the thing, still not terribly helpful to me, right? At least I've got it digitally though, and that's where Monkey Learn comes in. So Monkey Learn is another one of those AI things. It's intended for sentiment analysis in social media. You can use it to say, if you got 600 reviews on your t-shirt that you're trying to sell, and you know, you're trying to figure out if people actually like the thing, that's what you can use Monkey Learn for. They have the paid version is around $399 a month, but good news is they also have a free version. So I used the free version and plugged in all that data into it, and it spit out some sentiment. And so that was me taking the results of Monkey Learn from all of this different content and just hand jamming a word cloud. I could have used another tool to create the word cloud itself, but I just decided to use Procreate based on the results I've got. And so, you know, again, just like Tanya said, you have to build in a little bit of time in between the input and then the processing before you can do a big reveal. The good news is that I didn't have to reveal this until the next day. So, you know, sitting there in Las Vegas with a Mai Tai in my hand and, you know, jamming away on Procreate was totally the way to go. And then this is what I actually revealed to him the next day. So a single vision of what Volunteers of America Healthy Communities look like. Okay. So I just wanted to give this to you as a use case for how you might use this in your work, in your practice. Since then, I've used it for survey analysis, environmental scans, scrubbing through focus group and key stakeholder interviews, just because, you know, this stuff creates a ton of content. And how do you just chunk that to find trends and themes? Well, you could hire your kind of intern MBA, or you could use ChatGPT for it. Okay. All right. So with that, let's kind of back it out and open it up with questions and comments. I noticed in chat, Heather says, I'm curious if anyone in our field is contributing to testing, providing information, or are we allowing the general public to help develop responses to facilitation exercises so it's more natural? I'm not sure who is driving the culmination of this information, but it'd be interesting to know who is contributing. Heather, do you want to say a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I can. And I don't know a whole lot, but I do know that, for instance, my sister has been doing this side gig where she goes into an app and she picks a topic and then she does some research and then she adds what her flair to that is. And so we've been talking about how we're using AI as a user of facilitation, but where is that information being drawn from and how many of us in our field is contributing to that? Meaning if someone, for instance, this is pretty broad, but if they were to say, okay, what are some icebreakers? And then of course, we're the ones that are putting that information in, it's not coming from other groups. So for instance, if a large majority of visual practitioners were doing that, those icebreakers may look different than process facilitators or facilitators of different flavors, right? So I'm just wondering,
right.
You know, we're talking about the user end on this side, but how many of us are actually contributing to that knowledge in a more proactive
way?
Okay,
so here's what I've heard, okay? And so this is only as good as hearsay. Now, this field is evolving so fast that a lot of people use these terms differently. One of the definitions that I like the most is that machine learning is the flip side of artificial intelligence. In other words, you get to artificial intelligence by machines learning. Okay?
Right.
And in order for that to happen, somebody's got to sit there and train the machines.
Right.
to say, you know, it's the same thing that we do when it's like, okay, before you can log into this website, you know, which ones are the school buses, right? What we're doing is we're actually training a machine to identify what a school bus looks like in all of these different, you know, kind of scenarios. By the way, one of my favorite examples of this at work is this company called Enabled Intelligence. Okay, and here's what these guys do. This is really, really cool. There are these, again, it's sort of like that school bus thing. There are these image recognition AIs that are out there that are supposed to identify, like, you know, certain things. And in the United States intelligence community, what they're trying to do is to get, you know, AIs to enable whatever, tanks, you know, missiles, planes, whatever, that sort of thing. Well, the time that it takes to sit down and to teach a machine how to do this, it can be a real grind for a lot of people to say, okay, you know, that's a B-17, that's a B-17, that's a B-17, that's a B-17. Well, what this company Enabled Intelligence is doing is it's actually hiring people that are on the autism spectrum, people who have intense focus, who can sit there and work with the machines to say, that's what this is, that's what this is, that's what this is, that's what this is. And I just, when I heard their story, I thought, wow, this is a really, really cool way of using people and their gifts in order to get something, you know, that we need anyway, which is, you know, this machine learning. Anyway, Heather, to your point, the definition that I've heard of it is that the machine learning gets you to the AI, but somebody's got to sit there and train the gosh darn thing. I don't know who in our industry is sitting there with a machine and training it to say, all right, this is an icebreaker, this is an icebreaker. Why don't we open that up and see if anybody has heard different? Guessing not. I know that there's a lot of content out there. So for example, the IAF, the International Association of Facilitators Methods Database, if you set, you know, ChatGPT to scan through that thing and identify, you know, here's all the different kinds of icebreakers that can be used as, like, you know, trust building or strategic planning or, you know, conflict resolution, I think it could do a pretty good job just because a resource like that is so rich. But I don't know if there's any individuals that are involved. Heather, was there something that was behind your question?
Yeah, I think most of it is, you know, what I'm reading seems to be pretty general. Like when you do a Google search and then here's the information that the internet has collected to give back to you. That's pretty general. But when we talk about something as specialized as what we are doing as visual practitioners, I'm just curious how much of that is being driven by true good information and not just by pulling the word visual, which we know can have lots of meaning, or graphic. You know, we ourselves in our own community have a hard time labeling it what it is we do. Who's informing that? And I don't have any fears around that. Don't have any concerns, but I'm just looking, you know, ahead in terms of saying if we as a community already have a hard time defining it as what it is we do, how is this going to be informed for the general public going forward?
I think it's a great question. Anybody have an answer for Heather, or maybe another question? I think that's one of those.
And maybe it's just something to ponder, think about, look into, whatever.
Martine, I noticed you're off mute, but is that might be a dangling on mute?
I don't know.
Nope. Casey, what's coming up for you?
One of the things to build upon that, I always think that if you can clearly define exactly what you do, it means AI is going to replace it. Machines going to come in to replace it. So one of the beautiful things about sometimes not being able to clearly define exactly what you can do makes it what you provide a little more unique and a little more useful and valuable.
Good point. Just for fun. Go ahead, Angelique. I'm sorry.
You know, in an indirect way, we might be informing the large language model, because, you know, all of the content that we put out there is part of the model. So if you go into ChatGPT and you ask it to explain, you know, about graphic facilitation or graphic recording, it spits back an answer that's, you know, pretty darn good, but also is very reminiscent of everyone's marketing copy on their websites. So I don't think that my understanding is that information isn't curated in a way where somebody's validating it, that it's all in there, which is part of the reason, you know, we get crazy answers back sometimes. Yeah.
Yeah, so just for fun, I've been playing around with Bing, which again we've identified is not fantastic, but I want to share with you a couple of things that I came up with. So when you type in graphic recording, here's what you get. It's kind of interesting. Okay, not a whole lot of content there, but there you go. When you type in sketch notes, here's what you get. A little closer, right? Again, no text, which is kind of interesting. I'm saving this though because those are pretty neat images. I might want to use those as containers. And then when you type in graphic facilitator, well, you get these folks, which is like, okay, I wish I looked as good as these people. You know, these are like male models, you know. So anyway, Heather, going back to your point before, it's like, you know, I think that there still has to be, at least with our work, there has to be a human in the loop. And you know, like what Tanya and Angelique have been talking about, I think that, and Angela, there's certainly a case to use AI as a tool in our work. You know, it's not so much, I'm not concerned about being replaced by, you know, the Terminator anytime soon. More like, how do we use this stuff in order to do what we do better? What else? What else is coming up for folks? And Angelique, you're speaking.
I'm on the mute thing. 3 years later still gets me all the time. So something that I thought was really interesting during one of the prompt challenges that was on Twitter, it was for specifically using the feature of drawing things as a cross section. So people came up with all these really interesting things to look at in a cross section, but they could say what was inside it. So if you were doing a cross section of the earth, you know, you could have it be something entirely different inside. But there was a lot of text that the AI was putting in there, and it wasn't real text. It was just simulation text. And it was actually sort of these beautiful alien alphabets. And it's just starting to learn how to work with text to spit text visuals back. And, you know, I'm kind of wondering how that's going to influence what we do, like what we saw with Brian doing with creating those word clouds, when we can give it really distinct instructions to integrate text with the images that we'd like to create as well. And how that all ties back with, it just seems like it could get really complex really fast, and the potential for it's pretty cool too. But it's not quite there yet. So maybe next week it'll be doing that.
It's coming quick. I did one more. You want to see it? There we go. So I decided I try to be as descriptive as possible. So I typed in graphic recording, graphic facilitation, visual notes, sketch notes, and bullet journals. Figured that was enough to go on. And it came, and it's not too bad. You know, it got pretty close. You know, I like the color scheme there. Sort of like a, you know, cyan, yellow, magenta kind of thing going on. But I think that's pretty good. Of course, the language is nonsense or Danish. I get them both confused. I'm not sure which is which, but you know, there you go. It's kind of neat. All right, so we're coming up just to the hour. Before we break, I just want to do a quick check just to see if anybody else would like to weigh in. Questions, comments, queries, posers, inquiries. What's coming up for you before we close? Let's see. Let's go Angela, and then yeah, we'll start with Angela. Angela, what's coming up?
So those images, how does it work with copyright and use and that sort of thing? Is that someone's work that is being stolen for that, or?
So it's a unique design, okay? And if we take a look here, I'm not going to read this whole thing, but right here where it says terms of use. Okay?
Yes.
And again, this is Microsoft Bing Image Creator powered by DALL-E, right? Each one of them is different. But I click on terms of use, and it's got a whole bunch of, like, you know, language. And so here's ownership of content, you know, code of conduct. I'm not going to read through this whole thing here, but you can go in and take a look at it. What I would suggest is if you're going to use one of these things, take the time to scan through it. I will tell you, when I use it for, you know, as a reference image, I change it so much, just having it off to the side, that you wouldn't even recognize the generated image from the thing that I'm actually drawing. So I'm not too worried about it.
Okay, thanks.
Anybody else? Yeah, Mike,
Hey.
what's going on?
Well, I mean, I think what you just said, Brian, is as an inspiration source is so important. And I think that helps get around the, I don't really know where this came from. And a lot of times, at least I found with ChatGPT, when you poke and prod and say, well, specifically, where did this come from? It's happy to give you a URL, and most of those are 404s. So I think to use as inspiration is going to be really important. One question I had back to the group, and Brian, maybe you face this, is the text input limit, at least with ChatGPT. I mean, I parse things out. I've also considered just putting together some hidden web pages. So I can point it and say, take a big volume of copy. But if anybody else has found a hack around, seems like about 3,000 words seems to be the limitation in getting something in as a query.
Yeah, I do know a hack for that. So you can actually save a Google Doc as a unique URL and then point it at that URL if you want to get around that word limit. That's a quick one. Somebody might know an easier way to do it. Sonia, you've been using ChatGPT more than I have.
I've never run into the word limit issue with the stuff that I'm using it for, but that's a really good tip, Brian.
So you put the Google Doc URL in ChatGPT and then it does its business? Is that what you're saying?
Not exactly. So if you have the Google Doc URL is one thing, okay? Within Google Docs, you can say publish to the web, and that becomes something totally different. And so you can actually, this is kind of a neat way of creating some cheap and easy web pages if you need to do that. But it will publish it in a different format where you wouldn't even be able to tell it was a Google Doc. It gets rid of all of the graphic user interface. And so if you do publish to the web, that'll spit out a different URL that you can use. Cool.
Thank you very much for
we're
that,
just
Brian.
about coming up to time. No problem, Mike. Nice to see you. We're coming up to time, so I'm gonna go ahead and stop the recording unless there's anything else. And thank you all for joining us. The robots are taking over.